All right, everyone. Welcome to today's operator training. My name is Hannah Hickam. I'll be your host for today. And let's just go ahead and get started with the Q&A from the previous trainings. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and chat them in. The chat function, if you hover around, you should have a toolbar pop up either at the top or the bottom of your screen, and you can click on the three dots to access the chat feature. And then if you want to raise your hand on the participants box, it's kind of the same thing. You hover around until your toolbar comes up, and then the participants little section will be there. You click on that, and then at the bottom right, you click on the three dots to raise your hand. And this is from any past presentations that we've given. So we'll just give a couple minutes for people to get their questions together and type them in. I know some of them can be quite long, and it takes a little bit of time to get in. Oh, and just an update while we're doing that. We revised the agenda today just a little bit, so that's why it's slightly different from what you might have seen if you looked at it earlier than about 8:30 today. And also, while we're doing that, actually, never mind. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions or anybody. Oh, here we go. I guess I'm going to have my other co-host read that, and whoever is most apt at answering that can go ahead and unmute themselves and answer those questions.
Good morning. This is Greg Duranlo, Environmental Manager. For Aaron's question, for approved 2As before January 15th, 2021 that note an operator is using spread fields for waste, will the operator be expected prior to operations to sundry the approved 2A to haul waste to a commercial location? Waste disposal after January 15th, 2021 will have to comply with the 900 series rules. So water-based bentonitic fluids may still be land applied in accordance with our rules, and cuttings will have to be managed in accordance with our 900 series rules. We did add a 900, I believe it's in 905, but I don't have the rule right in front of me. We did add a section describing the appropriate disposal and management of cuttings. And question on the Form 2As, will current Form 2As in draft automatically update to the new format? Jay, do you want to take that one?
Sure, and that's actually the topic at 10 o'clock, but it's a big topic. Yes, as soon as the Form 2A, the revised Form 2A is released, any Form 2A in draft will flip over to the mission change revision version. Hope that answers the question. And we'll talk about that again.
And so I think that and Feldman's question, will 2As in process be updated to the new format? And I think that's essentially
no.
Oh, I was going to say that's the same question, but it's not.
It's not the same question. So there's forms in draft and there's forms in process. In process includes on hold, delayed. Those forms will never be touched again except to be removed. And I'm going to go through that at 10:10. They will not be converted. They'll stay in the old version.
Okay, the next question, are there any changes to sound walls for locations that are already permitted and some wells have been drilled with some yet to be drilled? Are the same COAs in place from the approved permit? And so kind of a lot of layers to that question. The Rule 423 has some sections of it that are applicable to a new permit coming into process, and some sections, such as the noise standards, that are applied as an operational standard. Those operational standards are the measure for compliance going forward. So the BMPs will need to be such that they allow the operator to meet the new operational standards, or the work that's done on site will be held to the new operational standards. Could we request that a Form 2A in process be returned to draft so that it updates to the new format?
No, that's not going to happen. The commission made it very clear how they wanted the pending 2s and 2As to be handled. It's in the statement of basis and purpose. It's also in our the guidance document that starts out as Rule 301 about the transition. And again, I'll go through that at 10:10.
All right, it looks like the questions have concluded for now. We do have a quick announcement, something I just want to show you guys. Here's our website. The hearings and application guidebook is up, process guidebook is up, and I just want to show you how to get to that. So on the green tab or the green line here, you go to regulation and then scroll to hearings. And then scroll down and it's right here, the hearing and applications process guidebook. This will include how to file the OGDP, which I know we've had a lot of questions on. So this is it right here. You can download it right up here. Should just go right into your downloads folder. So hopefully that is easily understood. Let us know if you have questions on that and we'll answer them at the end. Oh, sorry, that's my next one that's up, but let's see. Next up we have, that's the next presentation. Awesome. So Form 2 revisions with Alex Axe, and they were kind enough to give us a Google Slides presentation, so that should be exciting to try for the first time here. So Alex, I believe that you're able to unmute yourself so you can take it away.
Yeah. So hi everybody, my name is Alex Axe. I'm one of the permitters, and as Hannah said, I'm here to talk to you about the revisions we're making to the Form 2s for the mission change rulemaking. Just as a note, this is intended to be more a broad overview of this is what the changed form is going to look like. Details on how to fill out the various new and changed fields is going to be in the Form 2 checklist that has been updated, and that will be available to you shortly, like within the next couple of days. So, you know, when you get into the questions, maybe don't get too into the weeds, because there will be the checklist, which we all know and love. All right, next slide, please, Hannah. So one of the bigger things is there are a lot of process changes for the Form 2. There's no longer going to be a completeness process for Form 2s, which means they're no longer going to go into upload. They're going to instead go directly to in process. Also, because there's not a completeness process, we're going to be able to return Form 2s to draft from in process, either because there are issues with them or at your request, which is pretty nice. Form 2s are no longer going to be rejected. Form 2s will now be reviewed concurrently by engineering, OGLA, and permitting. And my esteemed colleague, Stephen Schwartz, is going to go over the OGLA part of that in a couple of presentations, if I'm remembering the state of the schedule. And then the practice of submitting a monthly permitting priority list will not be continuing. We will no longer use these lists from operators to prioritize and review Form 2s, and will be conducting technical review generally in the order the forms are submitted. Next slide, please, Hannah. All right, so general tab changes. We've added a local government tab. We've completely removed the exceptions tab because most of the exceptions have just gone away. And then we've renamed some of the tabs. So the cultural setbacks tab is now the safety setbacks tab. Drilling and waste plans is now drilling plan. Casing tab is now the casing and cementing plan. Next slide, please, Hannah. So on the well name and contact info tab, there is actually only one change, but it's a pretty significant one. you'll see that we've got a field that says amend right next to the refile. And amend and refile are two very different things, and there will be more detailed guidance on this later and also in the Form 2 checklist. But basically, by rule now, refiles are only for Form 2s that have expired or will be expiring within 60 days. So if you need to make major changes to an already approved permit, then you'll be amending it using this amend function. Next slide, please, Hannah. All right, on the well location tab, it has most of what you're familiar with. We've just kind of rearranged things a bit. We have removed the GPS operator name. I don't think anyone's going to miss that field. We've added vertical to the choice of well plans, so you can now tell us your well is vertical instead of just saying NA. Next slide, please. So the big rearrangement is there's now this subsurface location section, which is where we've put the TPZ and the bottom hole location information. Next slide, please. And you'll see we've added another entire thing. So you've got the top of productive zone, the base of productive zone, and the bottom hole location. And you'll be needing to give us location information for all of those. Also, there's now a requirement to give us information on the measured depth of the TPZ and the BPZ, and what the TVD for those is probably going to be, and which should line up with your directional plan. That information also comes up for the bottom hole location, but those fields are just located on a different tab. Next slide, please. So the local government tab has pretty much what you're used to seeing from the current Form 2 that used to be on the well location tab. It's just got its own spot. The changes are, there's now a required question where you need to tell us if the well is in an area designated to be of state interest, which you've probably heard us refer to as 1041. Next slide, please. And now we got rid of the local government siting permit type field, because you can just tell us that in the comments if you want to give us that information. And the filing date of the local government siting permit has been replaced with date of final disposition for that siting permit. Next slide, please. The surface and minerals tab has been extensively changed because we have refocused from talking about right to construct, because that is an issue for the 2A, to focusing entirely on the minerals that the well is going to be developing. So I'm not going to go through these questions one by one. That's kind of a thing for the checklist to look over, but they are different. We're talking about minerals developed by the wells. Next slide, please. We've kind of updated the instructions on the lease information that we ask for. And you'll notice that this distance from completed portion of wellbore to nearest lease line of described lease has been removed from this tab. Next slide, please. The safety setbacks tab looks pretty familiar, except you'll notice we're asking you for fewer distances. These are the ones that are required by rule for us to ask. And you'll also notice that we've completely removed the designated setback location information section because that no longer applies. Next slide, please. On the spacing and formations tab, we have taken the little objective formation section and put it at the top. And then in the change that is personally my favorite, the unit configuration field has now had its character limit greatly expanded, so you can put an entire DSU configuration in there. So if you manage to hit the character limit, let me know, and I will be very impressed. Next slide, please. There is now a subsurface mineral setbacks section. And again, I'm not going to go over these new questions one by one. That's a matter for the checklist. But we're having that instead of the spacing and unit information section that we used to have. And it is basically going to walk you through, is your well in a unit, or is it governed by lease, etc. This is also the tab where the one and only exception that you can now request for a Form 2 is located, and that is the 401C exception. And you can see it's at the bottom for your exception location. Next tab, next slide, please. The drilling plan tab, it's the tab formerly known as drilling and waste plans. This is where the TVD information for the bottom hole location is, just because the proposed total measured depth, which is the bottom hole location, was already there. Next slide, please. We've removed the groundwater sampling section. We've also removed most of the drilling and waste management program section. There are these 3 questions that remain, which do need to still align with what is on the approved 2A. Next slide, please. On the submit tab, we renamed the comprehensive drilling plan to the comprehensive area plan, the CAP. And then we've added 2 fields so that if this Form 2 is subject to an OGDP, you are required to give us the OGDP name and ID number. Next slide, please. We will be updating the attachment name list to remove attachment names that are no longer used or applicable to the Form 2. And so on the updated Form 2 checklist, the list only will contain attachment names that you should be using. So that'll hopefully kind of clear things up a bit. And that's it. Next slide. Those are our changes. Thank you.
Great job, Alex. Thank you. And Jane, do we want to take questions after each one, or do we want to do it at the end? Or Greg?
Hey, Greg, now or later?
Sorry, I was having trouble finding my unmute button and
It
turning on the camera button. I think I would say, since we're getting some questions in directly related to Alex's presentation, we should go ahead and take them now.
Okay, great. I think the most recent one was this, with January 15th being the deadline. Is that the one that you guys saw was the most recent one after we answered the other ones?
I believe that's correct.
Okay, great.
Pretty lengthy though. Might take me a minute.
It is. Yes, give us a moment to read these and we'll begin answering them.
Okay, so this is with Rule 308, with January 15th being the deadline, are we still expecting additional permits to be approved between 2As and 2s for operators, especially for operators tied to 1041 WOGLAs between today and tomorrow? So I can comment on that. We have scrambled over the last several weeks to get as many permits as possible that were ready for final review and final approval through that process. We triaged the permits that were remaining and what operators were requesting, and we have pushed those permits out. And I believe we have a short list remaining on the final approval queue for the director's final signature. If you did not receive a permit that you were hoping to receive, you can contact us to see if it's on that final. Actually, better yet, go to eForms and see if all other tasks are passed. OGLA 181 permitting final review. If all those tasks are passed and it's just waiting on the director's signature, you will get that permit. If there are other tasks that are active, be they final review, OGLA 181 permitting, engineering, any of those tasks, if they're not passed right now, that permit will not be issued, and you will have to follow the process for replacement of that permit. Let's see. So yeah, so a 2A would have to, kind of reading the bottom of that question, and it got split up on my sheet that I'm tracking. The second part of that question is, should operators anticipate the COGCC delaying review of completeness determination that operators would have to go to a hearing in these first few months? So if you have a 2A approved, Stephen's going to talk about that workflow here in just a minute, but you can submit a 2 under an approved 2A, and that will go through our processes that will be described here in a minute. A 2A will need to be submitted in accordance with the rules that go into effect at midnight tonight, including the submittal of an OGDP application to the hearings unit, and the 2A, 2B, 2C, et cetera. So at this time, the 2As will need to go through the whole process.
I've got that one.
Okay, go ahead.
Barbara, I checked the rules and no, we did not add the requirement for the bottom of the productive zone to be included on the well location plan. I wish we had, but we didn't.
Okay, the next question is, can you define what the final disposition date is? Weld County considers the final publication date as the approval date. Is this the same, or would this be the hearing date if approved? I believe what the local government considers the final disposition date would be most appropriate. So if that's 3 days after the hearing when it gets published, then that's fine. If that would be the appropriate thing to put in that field. Thanks, Jane, is the next comment. So it looks like that's that catches us up on questions. So Hannah.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Greg and Jane, for answering those questions. Next up, we have Jane with permitting scenarios, and just give me one moment to get that up. Okay. I believe this is the one. And let's do that. All right, take it away, Jane.
Thanks, Hannah. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jane Stanzik, a permitting manager. So first slide or next slide, please, Hannah. So this is Rule 304A, which is the rule that tells us when a Form 2A is required. And I've underlined the significant change that the mission change rulemaking added, and that is that a Form 2A is submitted as part of an oil and gas development plan application. And I will reiterate that at the actual oil and gas development plan application is a hearing application. So the hearing application is filed and in the e-filing system for hearings, and the Form 2A is filed in e-forms. So the big change is that 2As are now part of an OGDP application. Next slide, please, Hannah. And here's the new rule or the revision for when a Form 2 is required. And again, I've underlined and italicized the big change from the mission change, and that is if the commission approves an OGDP, or if the operator has an approved 2A and approved spacing if needed, then they submit a Form 2. So the Form 2 cannot come in until these criteria are met. It's a different world now. Next slide, please, Hannah. So for a new oil and gas location, all of these things have to be filed and approved. The OGDP hearing application, the 2A, the 2B, the 2C, before you can file a Form 2. But there are lots of other scenarios, and I'm not going to go through them all. They're here in this slide set, which will be posted. Lots and lots of questions have been coming to staff, a lot to the permitting staff, Penny Garrison and her staff, all being, well, what if this and what if that? And there's a lot of what ifs because there's a lot of different scenarios. So some general tips to help you understand in your specific scenario what is going to be required are, if a 2A is required, an OGDP is required. And that includes a 2A for a new location, a 2A to amend an existing location, and a refile 2A for an expired or expiring Form 2A. If spacing is required, an OGDP is required, even if no Form 2A is required. And if an OGDP is required, a Form 2B and a Form 2C are required. So those are kind of just some highlights. Next slide, please, Hannah. So the rest of this presentation, I think I came up with 15 different scenarios. I'm not going to walk through them all now. Like I said, it would take forever and it's too boring. But hopefully this can give you some guidance that your what if is one of these scenarios. And by going through all these, you'll kind of understand the new framework for filing 2s and 2As and OGDPs. So the first category, which has several scenarios, is approved Form 2A and replacement Form 2s. So that's these two scenarios. Next slide, Hannah. And these two scenarios. Next slide, Hannah. And these two scenarios are an approved Form 2A and not a replacement Form 2, but a new Form 2. Next slide, please, Hannah. These scenarios are addressing when a replacement Form 2A will be needed. Next slide, please, Hannah. These scenarios are addressing situations where you need to file a Form 2 for an existing well to deepen it, re-enter it, recomplete, sidetrack, convert from a Strat test to a production well. So here's a couple of scenarios for that. Next slide, please, Hannah. And here's a couple more. Oh, that's okay. That's fine. So there's 4 scenarios in there. Next slide, please, Hannah. So I put together a scenario outline for refiles and also for amended Form 2s. Just now, Alex explained that the Form 2 now has a category that's separate from refiles and it's amended. We used to, the only mechanism we had for substantive changes to an approved Form 2, meaning that they couldn't be, those changes couldn't be requested on just a Form 4, we just used a refile. But now the rules specify when a refile Form 2 or Form 2A are required. And so we added to the Form 2 what the Form 2A has actually had for several years, and that's an amendment. So here's a couple scenarios to help understand how you file an amended Form 2. Next slide, Hannah. I think I'm done. Am I done? I'm done. So again, just because going through 16 scenarios would be way too brutal for all of us, this guidance will be posted and you can go through it. Hopefully what your what if situation is covered, and you can figure out what's required. And of course, if your what if isn't, you can call us and ask. Thanks. Questions? Only one? Will the guidance for new Form 2 and new be updated? Yes. The answer to that question is yes. So we published a couple of years ago 2 different guidance documents for old Rule 303D, which said substantive versus non-substantive changes for a 2 and a 2A. When do you need a new 2 or 2A? When do you need a sundry? We will update that, but that's going to take us a while. In the meantime, you've got these scenarios, and hopefully that will help you answer those questions. Nothing else? Good. Thanks, guys.
That seems to be it with the questions. Thanks, Jane. Great job. Next up, we have Stephen Shores with the Form 2. And just give me a moment to get that started. All right.
Well, here's a quick question.
Okay.
Did you say where you would be posting these scenarios? So again, all of these presentations that we're providing to you in these operator trainings will be posted in the mission change guidance document list. And that list is getting longer and longer and longer. But everything you see here, boom, we're just going to get over there. It might take us till tomorrow, but we get it there, and you can pull it up so you have it for reference.
Sure. And real quick, while we have that question, I'm just going to drive everyone over there real quick. First, you go to regulation on our homepage, and then down here to operator guidance, and then down here to past meeting agendas, recordings, presentations, etc. And then it'll be up here. It'll be a new one, and then these will go down more. So,
and there's another place. So
okay.
Hannah, please click on SB 19181.
All right.
And right there in the middle, mission change guidance. And there's the list. These are the things we've presented. Some of the things are going to be presented in the future, but the documents are prepared, and so we've posted them.
There you go. So
and then at the top of that page, there
right
is
here.
the link to all the recordings and training presentations that Hannah just got you to the normal way. So multiple ways to get to the information.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Let me just move this guy back over here. All right. If there's no other questions, Stephen. Oh, whoops, that's not the right one. Let me get out of that. There we go. Stephen, I believe this is you. You can unmute yourself and take it away.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Jane. Hello, everyone. Stephen Shores from the OGLA group. I'm going to be talking about the COGCC Form 2 process, talking more broadly about the COGCC review workflow, and as Alex alluded to, focusing more on how the OGLA review of the Form 2s that will be coming in likely tomorrow will be handled. So next slide, please, Hannah. All right, so an overview for this talk. I'll start with a Form 2, what happens when you hit submit. A little bit of this will be a repeat from Alex's, but we really want to drive home how the new Form 2 process is different than previously. Then I'll go into some of the specifics of the OGLA review of existing locations. This will be a reiteration of Rule 308C1B. Some of the considerations the OGLA group will be taking up during their review of these existing locations, and some of the information that may be requested from operators by the OGLA group during this review. And then at the end, I'll briefly touch on the new Rule 308C2, which covers Form 2 denial. And just a couple quick notes. The process I'm describing today applies to Form 2s for wells on an existing location or on a location with a Form 2A approved prior to January 15th, 2021. These are the Form 2s that we're anticipating to start receiving tomorrow and over the next couple weeks. So that's why we're focusing just on those today. It'll be a couple weeks until we have some approved OGDPs, and the review process for Form 2s with approved OGDPs will be provided at a later date. So next slide, please. All right, the Form 2, what happens when you hit submit? When a Form 2 is submitted, it will go directly to in-process status. This is similar to the Form 4, 5, 5A, 6, etc. Many of our forms, when submitted, go directly to in-process status. What does this mean? This means for the Form 2, there is no more completeness review. This also means there is no more public comment period. Once in process, there will be 3 different technical review tasks assigned to the Form 2. Permitting and engineering, which you're all used to, as well as an OGLA task. The OGLA task is assigned initially to the OGLA supervisor, John Noto. The OGLA supervisor will then assign the OGLA reviewer task to the different OGLAs. And I also want to be clear, sort of as how Greg alluded to in Tuesday's trainings, that some of the OGLA geographic regions might be changed or shuffled up. Any OGLA could be assigned as the OGLA reviewer for a pad of Form 2s. Next slide, please, Hannah. So during the technical review, all 3 groups will be reviewing concurrently. This means that there is no, this group needs to go first in order for these tasks to become active. All 3 will be active, all 3 will be reviewing concurrently. That means at any point in the technical review of the Form 2, any group may do the following: pass the task if the form meets applicable rule requirements, put forms on hold or change their task to pending to request more information, return the form to draft, or recommend to the director that the forms be denied. In the next slides, I will discuss what the OGLA review of existing locations will look like. Next slide, please, Hannah. Again, let me start with Rule 308C1, Big B. The director will review the oil and gas location where the well is located to ensure that necessary and reasonable conditions of approval are applied to protect and minimize adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. I want to be very clear. Existing location review is being taken very seriously by the OGLA group, and it will be thorough. Next slide, please, Hannah. Some of the considerations during OGLA technical review of existing locations will include, but is not limited to, the following. First, does the siting of these wells conform to adopted rules? A couple rules in particular will be focused on. Rule 1002E, covering surface disturbance minimization. Operators should expect questions relating to using existing locations or consolidated operations. If you're putting wells into an unbuilt location and you have an existing location, expect questions about why those wells couldn't be on that location. Additionally, if you have wells that you're trying to permit for 3 unbuilt locations in the same section, expect questions about why consolidation of operations isn't being undertaken or wasn't considered. An additional rule that we'll be focusing closely on is the new Rule 604 setbacks. So moving on, another consideration will be, if the location were to be permitted today, would it meet any of the alternative location analysis criteria? These criteria are covered in Rule 304B2B. And additionally, we will be taking into consideration, did this location already undergo director review through the objective criteria review process? Again, a point that we've been asked a lot, and I want to be very clear on. An approved objective criteria review memo does not mean automatic approval of the OGLA task on the Form 2. The objective criteria were finalized on May 16th, 2019, and since then, new rules have been approved. In many cases, the new rules go further than what was covered in the objective criteria, and the OGLA review of existing locations will reflect these new rules. In the next slides, I will go over the different types of information that may be requested during the OGLA review. Next slide, please. So here are some examples of types of information may be requested from an operator by the OGLA group during the review. It will include, but again, not be limited to, updating or enhancing existing BMPs, new BMPs that were not previously provided, any of the information required under Rule 304B for the 2A, and any of the plans required under Rule 304C. Now, in some cases, providing BMPs, plans, and information via the sundry may not be enough information to allow for the director to determine if a location is appropriately protective. In some cases, this will lead to a request of a full OGDP application to be submitted. And in other cases, this may lead to the director denying the Form 2. Next slide, please, Hannah. So here is the text of the Rule 308C2, which covers Form 2 denial, with sections underlined for emphasis. So the director may deny any Form 2 that does not meet all requirements of the Commission's rules or does not provide necessary and reasonable protections for or minimize adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. And these next sections are important. The director will put forth the reason for the denial, and if the director denies a Form 2, the operator has the right for a hearing in front of the Commission at an upcoming hearing. So if something is denied, you may take it to the Commission to have them decide on whether to uphold the director's denial or to overturn it. And next slide. So I hope this gives you an idea of how the OGLA group will be reviewing the existing locations for the Form 2s that we anticipate coming in starting tomorrow, and some of the facets of information that we may be asking you, as well as some of the questions regarding how the new Form 2 submittals conform to the new rules. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stephen. Great job. I believe Greg will be answering questions. So you can go ahead and unmute yourself, Greg, and fire away.
Thank you. Good job, Stephen. Thanks for the presentation. Question first about Form 4s. If a Form 4 was submitted for a change prior to tomorrow, but now falls into a Form 2 amendment scenario, will the Form 4 be processed? Yes, the Form 4 will be processed. However, that process may include a result of a denial of the Form 4 and a request to replace with a Form 2 as appropriate. So would still review the Form 4, but that doesn't necessarily mean we would simply approve it. Next question, if there is a mistake on the Form 2 and it is caught right after the operator clicks submit, something like a small typo, can we work with COGCC to correct this since there is no upload mode any longer? I think it's important to double check and reread your work before you submit for those things before you hit the click the submit button. But you know, yeah, you can certainly reach out to COGCC staff on those, and we can make a determination whether they should be pushed back to draft for an operator to make those repairs, or you know, spell the word correctly or whatever the typo may have been. So yeah, we can certainly push it back to draft from the in process stage, which we really couldn't do before.
Okay, it looks like that may be all the questions that we have for this one. So thank you, Greg, for answering those. Next up, we have Jane with the form releases tomorrow. Just give me a moment to get that one up. All right, Jane, you may take it away.
Thank you. Next slide, Hannah. This is nothing. So these are the forms that will be released tomorrow. You can see we've got a number of forms that have been revised to accommodate the mission change rules, and we have 3 new forms. The Form 20 and 20A isn't really a new form. We've had it for ages, but it is now in e-forms. And And of course, it had some revisions as well based on the mission change rules. A couple things to note. In the past, since 2009, as we moved forms from being all paper to being electronic, available in e-forms, we have still accepted from some folks a fillable PDF. We're done. You know, we're in 2021 now. All the forms that are available to be submitted electronically in the e-form system, that's your only option, is to submit them electronically. So just a note to folks that still sometimes fill out a PDF and email it to staff and expect staff to enter it into e-forms. We're, like I said, we're done with that. We're going to be electronic. So anyway, here's the list of forms that are ready, and the new, both revised and the new forms. Just a note on the Form 2A, we are still in an aggressive testing mode. We want to make sure that before it's released for an operator to try to fill it out and submit it, that it's fully reliable, that it has the integrity that it needs. So it'll be released when we have verified the full functionality, and we will update everybody tomorrow morning, like in business hours tomorrow morning, whether it will be actually available tomorrow or maybe a day or so after. Next slide, please, Hannah. So this is the question that came up a little bit ago, and it's been coming up over and over, so it's here in black and white. So Form 2s and 2As, existing forms and in draft will automatically be converted to the new mission change version. Existing forms in process, on hold, or delayed status will remain forever in the old version. We're not going to return any existing forms to draft so that they can be converted. And again, that's spelled out. The direction from the commission is in this statement of basis and purpose. All the other revised forms, meaning the 5, the 5A, all those that were listed on the previous slide, same thing. If a form is in draft at midnight tonight or soon thereafter, it's going to be converted to the new mission change version for completion with the new requirements and submittal. Existing forms in process, on hold, and delayed will remain in the old version, the current version, and will be processed that way. But if one of those forms is returned to draft, it'll flip over to the new mission change version. So staff will give some consideration and probably have a little discussion with you whether that's appropriate. And of course, a new form, when you click new form in eForms and start filling out a new form, it's going to be the new mission change version. Next slide, please, Hannah. So this is the order of our releases after tomorrow. The Form 2B will be the first one to be done. Then the Form 9, which is the new transfer of operatorship, replacing the use of the Form 10 for that. Then the Form 4, the sundry notice. And then we're going to work on this list of environmental forms. That's kind of how I characterize them. And the exact order has not yet been determined, but we'll let you know as soon as we know and have made those decisions. And then after that, these forms that are used for injection wells will be revised and released. A little note about the Form 2B. It will not be live tomorrow. Obviously, it's in the future list. But the OGLA staff is coming up with an alternative method to, sorry, it says my internet connection is unstable. Anyway, the OGLA staff is coming up with an alternative method for the requirement for a Form 2B to be met to submit an OGDP application. And that is all going to be explained at our training on Tuesday, next Tuesday. Next slide, please, Hannah. So I hope all of you realize that we have never, ever, ever done what we're about to do. We've never released 3 brand new e-forms and revised however many forms were listed on that list for tomorrow at the same time. It's usually been one form, a couple forms revised. There will be bugs and glitches. We've tested everything, but there's always something. So to facilitate being able to address questions, issues with the form, I can't fill out this form, I can't enter any data into this data field. We're designating a single point of contact by form. And so here are the forms, and here are the people, and here are their email addresses. So I'm asking everyone to please follow this. You can see that Mike Rigby is going to be the contact for the 5 and 5A. If Mike isn't a permitter you've worked with and you like some other permitter, if you send the email to that other person, they're going to send it to Mike. So it's just better to start with these single points of contact. The way that will work is that you will send an email to whoever is the right person. You're going to tell them what trouble you're having. You're going to give them the actual document number from e-forms of the form you're fighting with. And you're going to explain the problem. And if you get an error message, if you could take a screenshot of that error message and put it in your email, it will be so helpful. Then that person is going to look at your question, and maybe you just have a question. Why is this required? When is this required? If it's a question they can answer, they're just going to answer and tell you, oh, this is because blah, 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 or this is how you do it. If it's really something not functioning correctly with the form, that this contact person is going to send it to the developer. And the developers will work on it. And then this contact person will test the fix, and then they'll let you know that it's been fixed. So we've got lots of forms. If every form has one glitch, that's a lot of things for the developers to look at. So I'm just going to ask everyone to be patient. We're on it. We'll stay on it. It's going to be a challenge. Like I said, we've never launched anything of this scale before. So I'm just asking for cooperation with sending your questions straight to these single points of contact. It'll facilitate our process. Please don't email our developers. They're not going to answer. So here we go. It's going to be exciting in many ways. So do I have a next slide, Hannah, or am I done?
That says 5 of 5, so I believe you're done.
Awesome. Great. So do we have?
Great job.
Thank you, Hannah. Do we have questions?
Well, let me just tag on to what Jane said real quick before we maybe start managing some questions. And to provide, some context here to this significant change that we are accommodating. When you think about administrative processes, what we're talking about in this application process is the same as it's been for 50 years, right? an entity wants to do something that's regulated by the state, we as the administrative agent have the responsibility for reviewing that request to do that thing. And we respond typically with a permit or some approval or some other thing. This agency's commitment to do things in the most efficient way possible and to provide the highest level of public service that it can provide 10, 15 years ago began to develop this very effective user interface that we call forms, so that the applicant can give us the information that we know we need in the format that we know we need it to be reviewed in order to minimize that review time. I think that we need to just remember that we don't have to have that specific user interface in place in order for this application process to proceed. Beginning tomorrow, we stand ready to review any and every application that an operator or an entity wants to provide that they believe is compliant with the rules that are written in English without meaning to be, curt about it, but it's written to where we can all read it and understand it. In the instance where we have a user interface that we prescribe the operator to use, such as a form, then the law says that you have to use that form because that makes the process more efficient. To the extent that we don't have one of these more advanced user interfaces that we call forms completely ready to go, doesn't mean you can't send us the information. Just like Jane was saying, we've got a to-be substitute process that won't be as elegant as our eventual form to be. And once we get the form to be, the more elegant solution available, that will be to everybody's advantage to use. But until then, there are other ways to get us that information. So I just want to emphasize that and remind everybody that we may be just a little spoiled, honestly, for lack of a better word, at the elegant solutions that this agency, through its vision and leadership from a decade or more ago, initiated in this, what we call the form process. We've gotten used to it, but really it's just an elegant user interface for operators to provide us the information that we know they're going to need to give us in order for us to give them the best public service possible, and in order for us to do our job in the most efficient way possible, so we minimize the cost to the taxpayers and the state of Colorado in the process of administering this industry. So everything Jane said is I think right on target, right? As we get these more elegant user interfaces of forms developed and completely ready to go, and we start, we're going to have bugs in them. We're going to see ways to improve them. That's called continuous improvement, and we're committed to that, and we will embrace that as we go forward. So just know that as of tomorrow, we believe we are ready to review applications to determine completeness. Some of that information will come in through these more elegant interfaces that we call forms. If some will come in through less elegant substitute interfaces that we'll continue to expose to you. And then some of them may have to come in ways that you see best fit to meet your needs as an entity in the state of Colorado who needs to get information to us to review and approve for your operations. So I hope that helps to remind everybody that, 30 years ago, we'd all be using typewriters and sending in snail mail to get this process done, right? We've just, I think through this agency's innovation, gotten used to a much more elegant solution, but the old interfaces still work and will be sufficient for us to move forward and be able to review and approve permits and applications as we go forward. We'll just continue to improve as we go forward.
So Hannah, do you want me to just go through all these questions that I see on the chat?
Thanks, Scott. Yes, Jane, if you can go through them. I'm not sure which one was the first one from this
I got
one.
it.
Oh,
I've
awesome.
got it.
Thank
And
you.
I'm going to punt a couple to Greg. And Scott, thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's see. We have several operators getting ready to change operatorship. Is there a date for the new Form 9 to come out? No. But the Form 9 is developed. It's in testing. So we'll just keep moving it along, and we'll just let you know when it's out, it's out. Next question. Greg, can you handle this question?
Sure. So the next question is, are there any rule changes that will affect producing wells? And yes, absolutely. Many of the rules that were modified do affect existing wells and are, as I kind of characterized earlier, operational. You know, SB 19-181 includes language that the changes to the statute and rules apply to all conduct. And, you know, so that includes operations of producing wells. So I can't give you a blanket, all rules apply to all producing wells, but many operational rules do affect the way you handle producing wells.
Thanks, Greg. What is the status of the Form 2B? The Form 2B is in development. That's the status. Will we be able to transfer approved permits to another operator? Yes, you will when we get the Form 9 released. Will rejected status Form 2s be converted? I will have to check with the developers and some other folks on that. Sorry, I didn't think about that one. Will Form 4s Form 4s will continue in process, correct? Yes, Form 4s will continue, but as of midnight tonight, the way we look at them will be a little bit different, but they'll be reviewed, and if something else is required, we will let you know, just like we always do, except it's different. Okay, for current Form 2A and 2 in process, what is the benefit of notifying they plan to be submitted as the old doc? Okay, that's my next talk, is the question about replacement of forms as prescribed by the commission. So that's our next presentation. Will there be guidance on what kind of changes require amendments to Form 2 versus a sundry? Yes, someone had asked about updating that matrix guidance that we put together. Yes, we will update it, but I'm sorry, it's a little ways down the road on my priority list. But yeah, you bet, we'll update it. Any plans to do a non-form training safety spill pits? Greg.
Yeah, I'll take that one. Yes, there is. We sort of prioritized a lot of these permitting forms based on kind of operator demand in terms of getting these trainings scheduled, but certainly there will be training on all those relate to the 900 series rules. And tune in on Tuesday, we'll be doing an introduction to, I believe, 905A4. Hannah, help me out.
That was mean, Greg.
Well, she put the agenda together this morning, I think.
We need a deer in the headlights icon.
Yeah.
Hang on, I'm looking. And hopefully you guys can, I'm sorry, 911A4. I had 905 on my mind from the waste management questions, but 911A4 facility closure guidance will be on Monday, start on Monday. I mean, Tuesday.
Tuesday.
And I hope you guys can hear me better. Sorry about the audio earlier.
Next question. Form 5s and 5As in process will continue to be processed, correct? Correct. They will be. Okay. Also, any Form 5s that are sent back to draft and over a year old, I have noticed Form 5s have been updated to the new regulations, but the operator drilled these What is the expectation with the Form 5 as the operator should not be held to 2021 regulations? So I did mention that kind of briefly, but not clearly, I guess. Any form that's sent back to draft will be converted to the current mission change version. So staff and the operators need to consider this very question. Here's a Form 5, staff is trying to process it. It has lots of errors, but if it's returned to draft, it's going to have more errors because it's going to have all the requirements of the new form. So as staff is processing the hundreds, thousands of 5 and 5As that are in process, that will have to be a consideration and a point of discussion. We'll think, we'll address that one at a time. When you say it's in testing, do you have any external people? No, we have not engaged in all of these form conversions for the mission change. We've not engaged outside folks as we have in the past when we were only doing 1 or 2 forums to test it. So all of the testing is internal. Thanks for the question. Will there be operator training guidance for the 42s? Yes, we're going to have training for everything. And like Greg said, the way we've prioritized these trainings is based on what operators have indicated that they wanted first. And when I say that, it means like vice presidents. So talking to the governor. So anyway,
well, and industry groups have given us a lot of good input too, COGA and SOS, West Slope COGA, others, API.
So we're going to get there.
Jane, I might also add on Form 42s, a lot of the rules in 405 are very straightforward, so won't take much for training. If you have specific questions, because there's a couple that are a little bit more complex, specific questions, you might just throw those into the mission change FAQ form so that we can address them specifically if you have a need on those.
Right, and Greg, thanks for bringing that up. So here we have these points of contact for each form. But if you have a question about a form, the likelihood is that other people have the same question about that same form. If you put your question in the Q&A, then everyone will see the answers. And if you have a question, I would suggest that you go to the Q&A first, see if someone already asked that question, see if we've already answered it before you email the person on this list. When it's a question about filing a form, not a problem with the form itself. Will in-process Form 10s be processed in their current state? So I'm assuming that that question is about a Form 10 filed for a change of operator and versus the Form 10 as a certificate of clearance. Yes, all the Form 10s that are in process are being reviewed as they are. As of tonight at midnight, you cannot submit a Form 10 for a change of operator. The Form 10 will only be a certificate of clearance. But all the 10s that are already in will be reviewed and processed in their current state. And we are prioritizing that. We have a pretty hefty backlog. So I would request that if you as an operator have some Form 10s for change of operator that are pending, if you're contacted by Terry Ikonowe or Debbie Lutz because they have an issue, please reply right away so they can get that backlog cleared out. Hannah's got all kinds of links, and I guess there's no more questions. Great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Hannah.
Great, thank you, Jane. Real quick, somebody asked if I could show you where the new rules were. So on our web, so they're not up yet. They'll be up tomorrow. But if you want to navigate to them yourself tomorrow, because this link, you may not have access to that tomorrow, then this is our main web page here. You just go over here to regulation on the screen bar, and then scroll down a little bit to rules. And then the rules will be posted here. These are still the old rules right now, I believe. So yeah, they are. So yeah, they'll be there tomorrow, but they're not there right now. But that's how you get to them. So
And you can certainly get to any of our rules, any of the new rules through the mission change or through the SB 181 header, and then go to mission change, go to the rulemakings, Hannah.
Well, there's a faster way.
And mission change, and I think they're also posted right on our homepage on the right-hand side.
They're right on the homepage. They've been there for
there's
a
one.
month.
Oh, and then if you wanted to look at them right now, they're right here. You can go in and just download them basically.
Yep.
It takes a minute. Oh, by the way, this is the best way to download is right click on it and then click download. I saw a handful of people have told me that they have trouble downloading the agendas that I'm sending out. And so some of that is a setting, but some of that is also how they're doing it. So if you do this, right click and then download, that's the best way to do it. All right. So,
Hannah.
Yes.
Hannah, if you go to our homepage, and right there where it says Senate Bill 19181,
Right here.
no, go right, yeah, and then it says mission change rulemaking, click here.
Oh yeah, that's where I was just now.
Okay, all right.
All
Thanks,
right.
Hannah.
Yeah, sure thing. All right, so let me move that out. Next up is Jane again with pending permits transition. So give me just a moment to get that one up.
Thank you, Hannah.
That's it. You're welcome.
And we don't need that slide.
All right, there you go. Take it away.
So, in the SBP, it spells out and that there's a process to get from all the pending permits that were filed before midnight tonight and what's going to happen as we move forward. So this is a snapshot of the pending permits page. So on the green menu, you click permits. And if you do that, you go to this page and there is now a new tool function made specifically for operators to help facilitate this transition. It's called Operator Report and Export of Pre-January 15th Pending Form 2s and 2As. Next slide, please, Hannah. So here's a little close-up of what it looks like. You just put in your operator number and you hit go, and you will get an Excel spreadsheet. And I put the URL there to go so you can get there too. The spreadsheet will have two tabs. One tab is all of your pending 2s. One tab is all of your pending 2As. All that it's going to give you is a list of document numbers and well names. And then in column D, it's whether it's a 2 or a 2A, but the lists are separate anyway. Column A is intend to replace, and that's a yes or no answer. Next slide, please, Hannah. So in the statement of basis and purpose and in the mission change rule 301 guidance that I've referred to a couple times, and when this is over, we'll flip, Hannah will drive us back there so you can see where it is. This is the process that is spelled out. Between January 15th and March 1st, operators are going to inform us through an email which pending 2As and 2s they intend to replace. And you're going to use the printout from, or the export from that tool that I just showed you to create a spreadsheet to attach to an email. Every pending form needs to be identified by the e-form document number and the name of the well or the location. And the export from that tool has that in there for you. You're going to send the list to both John and Penny, John Noto and Penny Garrison. We ask that you communicate internally before you prepare your list and send it. And to us, from our perspective, we're thinking that means that you talk to your operations people, your planning people, your regulatory people, and your consultants. And the reason we say this is that in the past, on occasion, staff has gotten an email from an operator saying, from regulatory staff or a consultant saying, please withdraw these permits. And then the next day, they get an email that says, oh no, we just checked with our operations people and we didn't want you to withdraw those permits. So that actually has happened, and we're asking you to coordinate. You have between now and March 1st to get that together and to get it to us. So that's just a request, that because there's no going back. So then beginning March 2nd, staff will withdraw all the pending 2As and 2s, for which we have not received notice that the intent is to replace those. So for folks that think about their pending permits as sticks on the map, if you tell us you're going to replace it, the sticks stay there until you do replace it. If you don't tell us you're going to replace it, we will withdraw the permits and the sticks will come off the map. So that's kind of a visual of what is going to happen. Next slide, please, Hannah. Okay, so also between January 15th and July 15th, you're going to send us your replacement 2s and 2As. We ask that you notify staff with an email when you've filed a replacement 2 or 2A. Again, we need the e-form document number and the name of the well or the location. And your email is going to say, here's what we filed as replacements and here's what they're replacing. Again, those emails, 2As go to John Noto and 2s go to Penny. In response to that, when those emails, staff will go in and withdraw the old pending forms that you've just told us you filed a replacement for. Then on July 16th, which is the deadline to take care of replacing forms, all pending forms in process, on hold, delayed, and rejected that were pending today are going to be deleted. They're just gone forever. And the same thing will happen with forms in draft, except that action is not happening as of today, but it's as of the effective date of SB 19-181. They're just going to be deleted. So I don't know if you've ever looked, but there are like 8,000 draft 2s and 2As in the system. And some of them were created in 2009 and they're still in there. We're just going to clear those out. The e-form system, we've talked about doing this several times, that obviously there's forms in there that the operator doesn't even exist anymore. So we're going to purge our poor e-form system. Hannah, do I have a next slide? I don't think so. Nope. So that's what's going to happen. And do we have questions?
Thanks, Jane. Great job. It looks like there is one question.
So I think this question might be OGLA related. I noticed Jane and Stephen discussed if submitting a new Form 2A, an operator can be subject to updating an existing Form 2A that is approved. What are some examples that the COGCC can provide that are considered not protective or that would flag the director to state that an operator does not have sufficient information and an OGDP may need to be submitted? Just wanting to know some examples on this so that we know what to look out for operationally. As Stephen said in his presentation, the setback triggers will certainly be evaluated. The alternative location analysis criteria will certainly be evaluated. I can't throw a blanket out and say these will need a 2A and these won't. Many of those things it will be a iterative review process, site-specific, case-by-case review that we will have to conduct. Our mission is to regulate oil and gas development in a manner that is protective of public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. And our evaluation of a Form 2 submitted will be in that light.
There's a question, January 15th to July 15, number 3. Are you referring to the old document number? Sure. Yes. So when you have filed a replacement 2 or 2A, you're going to send us an email and it's going to have the document number of the old form that's sitting there right today that's being replaced, and hopefully a name, so we're not just relying on 9 digits to identify something, and then the new form number and name, because maybe the well name's different or the location name is different. So there's going to be number, name, so we don't mess up. Because once that's been that replacement has been filed, staff is going to withdraw the old one. So hopefully that answers that question. How will operators confirm? Oh, that you're, I think John and Penny will probably say, thanks. They're pretty responsive to emails. They usually say, thank you for your email. We'll make sure they do. Is that it?
All right, I believe that's it. If there are any other questions, we do have another 10 minutes for, well, 8 minutes for Q&A. But I'll just go ahead and put up the next operator training. This is our proposed agenda so far. It is, of course, subject to change, and I'll be sending that email out to everybody sometime tomorrow. So unless there's any other questions, I think we have come.
Hannah,
oh, go ahead, Greg.
Yep, I'll just note that I believe John Axelson will be giving the presentation on 9/11/A4.
Whoops. You guys, PowerPoint is very weird sometimes, the way that it does things. It just switched to a whole nother one. So yeah, I'll just update that real quick. So anybody who's into screenshotting can screenshot, but I'll also be sending that out tomorrow afternoon with all of the rest of the information. Oh, go ahead.
Hannah, it looks like there's a question on that regard. So how do you get on the email distribution list to get these next meeting invites?
Oh, perfect. I'll put my email address in here. You can just email me and tell me that you want to be on the operator email list, and I will add you to that email list. There you go. Hickam. Make sure that last name gets spelled right. Often it gets spelled wrong, and that's why I don't get emails. So it's K-A-M at the end.
And Hannah, can you just navigate on your screen to our homepage? Yep. These meetings are posted on the, whoa,
Sorry, I tried to get into the VPN and I'm not in the VPN.
On our homepage, right there on the left side where it says upcoming events, and it has the agenda, it has the Zoom information. So even if you don't get Hannah's email, you can look right there and see.
All right, it looks like that's it for questions. I might give folks another minute or two, but thank you all so much for coming to the training. We really appreciate it and hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Hannah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much, Hannah.